Bangkok needed.
жишээлбэл
And also if you see particulars are going into the
Сайн байцгаана уу хүн үзэгчдээ. Өнөөдөр манай дефакто нэвтрүүлгийн зочноор Утопиа компаний үндэстэн байгуулагч, гүйцэтгэх захирал ноён Жонатан Хөөрш оролцож байна. Good evening.
Good evening.
Welcome to Mongolia.
Thank you very much.
Please tell us about your company. It looks very interesting one. Sounds for me. Please tell us what you do.
Well, I've worked with slums across Asia for the last 10 years, and last year set up a new firm. It's a design and urban planning firm called Utopia. We have a cheeky name because we work with slums, but we do want to work in a positive direction. And so essentially we try to reimagine the future of slums and redesign the future of slums.
And you have already doing that?
We started a project recently with the mayor of Jakarta to design a slum solution for 25,000 riverside slum households.
Yes.
And we've just met with the mayor here in Ulaanbaatar, who's been very kind and invited us to work here as well in the Gur districts.
So you have met our Ulaanbaatar mayor, Batul, as well.
A moment ago, yes.
So let's, you had not only Indonesia, I understand, to other places as well, China, where else?
Yeah, well, I've been working with slums through another organization that I
Yes.
founded called Included 10 years ago. We work at the community level through lots and lots of community centers. And so we started in China,
Yes.
Beijing, Shanghai, moved to Nepal, moved to Bangladesh, are looking into Africa now as well too.
So the project that Utopia had done is now all so far in Jakarta only.
Yes, we're just at the beginning. We just started up
Okay.
about 9 months ago.
Okay, what is that?
So
What is done there?
So we're working with the mayor to design a slum solution for the riverside households, as I mentioned, and that's an evolving project. But ultimately, it needs to be a solution that is good both for the slum dwellers who live there, as well as the city overall. And so
course.
we're looking at different types of designs for different types of communities. But one
Yes.
critical thing is that many city governments around the world, as they're looking at their informal communities
Yes.
and trying to address that, many of them of goodwill will build affordable housing for them, but often moving them 2 hours, an hour and a half outside of the city,
Yes.
creating much greater issues, economic
Yes.
issues than they had before. And so we're working intently with the mayor of Jakarta to ensure that those who have lived there for a while can remain there and continue to be a part of the social fabric of that city.
So what you are saying is you are redesigning or redeveloping slums
Yes.
and get people living there.
Yes.
Those communities who were there before,
Yeah.
now they are living in much better conditions, meaning that
Yeah.
they have running water,
Yes.
everything.
Yes.
Well, that's a huge change. This is change and huge chance for people to get out of poverty as well. Poverty and slums go
Right.
together.
Certainly so.
Yeah. How do you do that?
We look at it, it's an approach of complex coordination. So slums and cities have all these different moving pieces. And almost as if you're producing a film, an executive producer needs to organize all the different key players, organize funding,
Yes.
and organize people around a unified vision. And so
Yes.
that's the approach that we're taking. At the same time, the cities that we have today around the world are cities of the 20th century. Cities are probably the greatest innovation of humankind ever. It has
Yes.
brought the economy, the quality of life that many of us enjoy now, starting hundreds of years ago. But the cities that we have today around the world are cities for the 20th century. And yet there's so many technologies and solutions that are rapidly improving,
Yes.
prices sharply dropping,
Yes.
and yet the formal city is too calcified, it's too rigid of a
Yes.
framework to try to embed some of these new solutions. And so we actually believe that particularly mayors across Asia and Africa and somewhat Latin America, when they're looking for solutions for their cities,
Yes.
they can look to the slums, the
Yes.
informal slums for that. And as they're redesigning their slums, they can design a city that's a better fit for the 21st century.
See, redesigning, okay, you see that and probably connect with city infrastructure,
Yeah.
get, if it's an issue of also school or something, that particular slums usually don't have this sort of soft infrastructure. And then, for example, you said that 250 households, or how many?
25,000 households.
25,000 households. We talk about what? 100,000 people
About 125, I think. Yeah.
Wow. And how does it cost? And where you have funding.
The funding to do that. So, you know, I think that as the project is evolving, we're at an aspirational stage of this. I think in 3 years we can look back and say, were we a failure or were we a success? Probably a mix, actually, in some ways. The government is contributing. They have resource and they're contributing to this project, of course. They already have momentum. We're also seeing not to our project, but the World Bank and other multilateral institutions also investing their resource. The same is possible here as well. I do believe that in the next 10 years or so, we're going to see an increase in private investment into redeveloping some of these.
Yeah,
these
in Mongolia
areas.
in particular, because the land mostly owned by these people too. Legally, they are now sort of certificate is issued on the land document is issued on. Many of people can take it. How familiar now you are with the situation in Ulaanbaatar city?
I've studied a lot over the last few months. I've listened a lot, absorbed a lot this week. We have, when it comes to comparing and contrasting the communities here, informal communities, to what we see in slums around the world, and we don't necessarily have slums here. They're informal settlements. But in the last 5 or 6 years, we've seen a tremendous amount of patterns come to light that we can predict. In many cases, what challenges a slum will face in cities across Asia, Africa, Latin America. Ulaanbaatar is a bit different in that they actually own their land. It's very different. And the second difference is that they don't live near the equator, where most slums end up being, because the climate affords that. And so we're fascinated to see and to learn how this might be a bit of a different approach. And I think, fortunately, those that are living there, because of our democracy here and policies in the past, they have the right to the land. That's about dignity. It's about belonging. And I think that's a great step forward for the country. It does slow things down, perhaps, a little bit.
It makes slow things down, yes.
Democracy slows things down as it simultaneously affords dignity. And so we, as a design firm, take a human-centered design approach, which brings the voices together of all the key players, including those who are living there. And at the end of the day, we need to convince them that this would be a better life for them than what they have now. And it's not,
because there are different level of income people, and some have even their own, not so bad already, houses in their fence. We call it fence. And some of them invest a lot, some of them nothing, no invested, different level of living. And so those who had invested, who had something made, or maybe at the street corner fence, they may have even shop. So very sophisticated here in that sense, because the land is owned. So hopefully you will find a way, and with the most participation of these people, right, in the failure or winning of this project.
Certainly so.
I would like to ask you a question about what made you to do so. I mean, how come, where are you from? Please introduce us, where you were born, school, etc.
Certainly so, and certainly an outsider here. So thank you to the people of Mongolia for welcoming me here as a partner. I don't have the accent, but I was born in Alabama. I grew up in Alabama, the deep south in the United States. I went over to China probably 12 years ago on a U.S. government scholarship program, planning to go into the Foreign Service and the State Department for the U.S. And then not long into that, as I was studying Mandarin, a friend took me out into a migrant community on the edge of Beijing, these informal communities. I still remember very clearly, it was a northeast Fifth Ring Road, that there was this community there. It was fairly broken down, and dozens of kids running through these alleyways that were dirty and dusty, running in front of me. And I saw that they were without so much. They were without adequate education at that time. They were without spaces to play. They were without supervision, because their parents are working 12, 14-hour days. But as you look closer, they had this energy and this creativity and somehow this belief in their own future. And that's something that really inspired me. And so I went back home that night, couldn't sleep. Next night, couldn't really sleep. I remember having a pad and a pen beside my bed, and constantly waking up with ideas. I was overwhelmed by what I saw and the scale of what I saw, but also really energized by what I saw and what might be able to be done as well. And it was almost like an engine that was lying dormant inside of me all of my life, suddenly got flipped on.
I
and
see.
so
Wow.
some people say, well, you're they try to say that I'm such a good person to start this nonprofit organization. I said, no, I just wanted sleep. I wanted some peace. So I had to start and do something in order to bring peace.
I'm with you, because when you see such a poverty where children are not eating well, they don't have anything to eat or less to eat, it's very disturbing. Not only in Mongolia, but in many countries, wherever you go and when you feel that, how you would feel yourself if you were a child at them. I understand you. So, I mean, what school you have done in Alabama?
I studied international relations. So I always joke now that I'm a fraud designer, fraud architect, fraud in many ways. But I've been really fortunate to have people come along that are experts in these areas, and also have a lot of passion, also have a tremendous amount of goodwill to create society around them in ways that they want their children to live in the future. And so we have really wonderful teams that complement my weaknesses.
How many people work in Utopia?
And included the first organization, we have around 60 or 70 staff spread out across a few countries. Utopia, we're a startup, so we're just a handful of people spread across the US, San Francisco, which is where I now live after 11 years in Beijing, Nairobi, Shanghai, so a few people spread around.
Pretty much global kind of presence.
It's a global issue. 1 in 3 of the world will live in a migrant slum within just a few decades. We have to deeply understand the shifts that taking place right now, that are taking place right now in this century, as the world literally is recalibrating itself. I look at the list of the top 10 cities in population 2050. Half of them are very different than what we see today. 2100, 85 years later, almost all are different than what we see today. And it comes from this rapid migration from the countrysides into the cities. And so we're certainly trying to be aware of those shifts that are happening, and trying to identify patterns, and trying to leapfrog ahead if you can. In some ways you can't cheat. I used to think with our companies that you can leapfrog ahead. Sometimes you have to go through the experience and mature, and you have to earn it. But I think there are also solutions for cities that can be leapfrogged.
I was in Jakarta, and I saw at the rainy season a lot of water is coming. So where is the location? What river is this, and how was the condition now? How is it now?
What year were you there?
Oh, this year.
Recently, so the mayor has began to...
Mayor when the president was that time mayor, or?
So they've both been working on it. So the president at the time was mayor, the governor, now President Jokowi, and now it's Governor Ahok, and they've been a very effective team in many ways. And I think we're seeing a new type of mayor. If you look here in Ulaanbaatar, look at Jakarta, other cities as well, that really have a desire to improve their cities quite quickly. And so when we see that, we want to get behind that and try to serve in the best way to help support that effort. But it's a long process. I think in Jakarta it might take 3, 4, 5, maybe even 7 years. And so the riversides will still look similar to what you were there when you were there a year ago. But they have begun relocating some of them, have begun building up the embankments, and so you can see what it might look like.
Yeah, and that means you need to replace them partially at least. Or maybe you may concentrate one part more. The empty part you work on. This is the scheme, or how to get these people, this slum itself, free?
In Jakarta, this is what the government has been doing, and here in Ulaanbaatar, in UB, we will need a similar approach. And the reason behind that is because the two cities have not. They've seen as non-negotiable keeping them nearer on the land that they've been living in for a long time and contributing to the city on for a long time, as they're providing a lot of the essential services that perhaps you and I are not, and we're taking benefit from that. And so certainly if we want to keep them there long term, we have to move them off for a period of time and then move them back in when things are finished. I think that I want to be careful though to not give the message that housing is the only issue. I think for 30, 40, 50 years, a lot of us as governments and multilateral organizations have largely looked at the slum issue as an infrastructure or hardware issue, housing or utilities, roadways, and whatnot. But the reality is, a slum is like an organism, just like a city is. It's made up of all the different molecules that a city has. And so I think that there's a need to also reimagine the processes of these areas. There's a need to reimagine the education and healthcare of these areas. I think even a need to redesign the image of a slum and its role in the city. Slums around the world are an asset to their city. That's a hidden secret that many of us don't know. Economically, they're an asset.
So
socially, they're an asset.
Then will they be, say, 100,000 people? You need the schools, you need the hospitals there almost. Then how will they grow? Kind of, these poor people will go together, grow together, or it will be kind of, otherwise it can be like segregation kind of things.
Yeah.
How do you address this issue? Or
integration.
How you integrate that into the city?
We believe that the best approaches that are most successful, looking at history around the world, is where the most micro level that you can integrate. Of course, you don't want to begin diversifying families. You want to keep them intact.
Yes.
But if multiple families from different levels of economic means can live within one community, we often see that that's very helpful for the second generation of those who were formerly in poverty to kind of move up through the system. And we've learned from Paris and other places that well-intended measures to build affordable housing outside the city causes tremendous issues. They're now tearing these buildings down.
I remember I used to live and study in Colorado, Denver, and there is an old airport, Stapleton, made into a very modern urban city, consisting of different level income families' houses. There would be, you buy up to $1 million or then half, then you can rent, sort of. There's no segregation, different income people, but live together. It's different design, but live together. And the common places like parks, cinema, restaurants are serving all the community. Is it the approach, or what is your vision on that?
The world talks a lot about human scale cities, the need for more human scale cities, more walkable cities, more sustainable, more livable cities, more people-centered cities.
That's what we need here.
And I think that the redesign of slums can afford the opportunity to get it right in ways that are difficult for the formal, normal, more rigid city that's been around for a long time. That being said, that if you can prove it out, let's say as you're redesigning the slum, if it's attractive enough, it can certainly draw people to join that community, and it can also cause the formal city to restructure itself as well. So we actually believe that the next generation city, the 21st century model of city, can be created and birthed from slums redevelopments. It's a tremendous opportunity.
Probably it will be relatively cheaper, and then you go to the traditional areas.
Believe so, unless we make it too nice to live, then over time it might be competitive. Well, we would love to. I have a deep and unshaken belief that we need to give our best effort to those on the edges of society. It's a question of our humanity and caring for those on the edges of our community. I think it reflects on us as societies and on how well we do that, instead of giving secondhand or leftover effort, energy, and resources to these communities. I think it really reflects on the strength of society to the level of care and dignity that we want to provide. So we're trying to see them as customers and win their business and earn their business.
But also if you see tickets are going into
Би рүүпхийн шог харахгүйгээр 1 минутанд иглүүлж 30 минутанд 1000 цифр тогтоодог. Энэ бол хичээл сургуулийн үр дүн. Аливаа үдлийг олон дахин давтвал дадал зуршлуулдаг. Хуримч гэсэн үнэтэй адил. Тогтмол хуримтлуулж байж үр дүнд хүрнэ. Судалгаа хийж үзэхэд 2 сая орлоготой өрөх сар бүр 200 мянган төгрөг хуримтлуулах боломжтой байна. Ингэж хуримтлуулж чадвал 10 жилийн дараа 53 сая төгрөгтэй болсон. Тийм учраас хуримтлалыг зуршлуулах.
Үн дэсний хуримтлалын хөдөлгөөр.
Тань хэрэгтэй бүх үйлчилгээ нэг дор зогслоос дэлхийн брэндээр томилсон хансаг зэрэглэлийн орон сууцыг 1-3 жилийн хугацаанд төлөвлөн өөрийн болгох таатай боломжийг зөвхөн бид санал болгож байна.
Миний ертөнц, миний уран бүтээлийн минь тусгал.
King Tower Luxury Apartment.
Бангкок нийлээд
Одоо жишээлбэл
Also, if you see particulates are going into the air.
You said about human skills city, smart city, or we call it different ways. In a way, we want to see our city, for example, with more trees, more greens, so that in the morning you can run. You know, the children can go bicycling, speeding, and all. How to make sure that these slums, when they are developed, having all these features?
We are both idealists and pragmatists. We have in mind the full vision of how we think microcities could become. At the same time, we know that we can't implement all of that right away, resource constraints and otherwise. We're fascinated by this question of what does a new city OS look like that's adaptable and over time can plug in some of these different solutions. I think one example of that might be the transportation. And so perhaps automated driverless cars, electric cars,
mostly,
are 3-4 years away, pod cars, not that far away actually. And so we need to go ahead and design the streets in a framework that can absorb that solution when it comes. Perhaps over time we need to ensure that there's sufficient public space so that over time it can be built in organically on top of that. And so we are intrigued by the question of what solutions are there today that need to be implemented, but even more than that, how do we create this adaptable, breathable, lightweight city OS framework, if you will, so that it can happen over the next 20 years or so.
Exactly. You said lightweight.
Yeah.
Meaning that not a lot big now, but palaces, not the big things will be made on the slums, right?
I think there's a few different elements to that. One is housing, for instance, should be prefabricated now. To
faster, cheaper.
Exactly right. The other thought I have is that we have is app-based administration. So it's the 21st century. We all have smartphones, some smarter than others. But the reality is we should be paying our utilities through our phones. We should be registering our cars through our phones. So you can actually save a tremendous amount of money and effort by the government themselves or whoever is administering the cities. It might be a PPP, a public-private partnership that administers these newer types of micro-cities. But there's a way to make it a bit more light. And if we step back even a bit farther, I have a picture on my phone that is making the rounds on Facebook the last year or so. It shows a desk, 1980. They have this massive Mac computer. You have a calculator, you have the paper, the pen, scissors, the glue, the calendar. And then the next picture is today. And there is a laptop or a smartphone sitting on that desk. It's unbelievable back then to think that this hardware could somehow be lightened and digitized, but they did it. And so again, we always have around this, we have more questions and answers at this stage. But those are questions that should be asked. What parts of the city can and should be reimagined?
And all this technology to be introduced to urban planning, construction. Now we have even the 3D printing.
Certainly.
Some things could be printed, and then a driverless car. Probably we're working on not gas, but on something else, electric or something. So we're going to see even in every country can go at the same time because technology is now all around the world, the same level exists.
Prices are dropping.
Yep, and that's why I think maybe it will make us more global too, don't you think?
I agree.
And now we need to convince more people to do so. Jonathan, I mean, what made you to, for example, to go abroad and to be more studying international relations, and what kind of things made triggered you to be foreign service officer or study foreign services?
I had the great privilege starting out as a teenager to both volunteer a lot and to go abroad to other countries. I think when I was 13, I first went to Belize. When I was 15, I went to Haiti, I think it was. When I was 16, I lived on the side of a mountain in Thailand during the monsoon season for 2 months during the summertime. We were trying to build this drug rehab center, and as teenagers, we didn't get much done. But we made an effort. And so these, have deeply influenced me. And I remember when I was, I believe at university, just thinking, Jonathan, you've been given all of this international exposure to social issues and whatnot. It's time you start thinking about what is your contribution back to society, and internationally, if not you, then who? So I really saw it as I've been given a privilege. 11 years ago, when I first walked into that migrant community on the edge of Beijing, it's been a great privilege for the last 10 years to have had the opportunity to invest my effort into something that I think will, is meaningful at the end of the day. So, it's my privilege. I've made choices as well in that process. I've deliberately oriented my life around the slum issue globally. I'd like to, in my own small way,
So you live now in California back. What city?
San Francisco.
San Francisco.
Yeah,
you don't have similar problems?
We have a lot of social problems with homelessness that are quite surprising, to be honest. But we don't have the pollution problems. We do have congestion issues, certainly.
Nice city though.
I'm surprised after living there for a year that the entire United States hasn't already moved to California. It's progressive, the weather's amazing, and it's a great place for me to live.
Family?
Yes, my 3-year-old son is there with me, and so he was born in China, in Beijing. First year and a half of his life grew up there, and then I moved him to California. And speaking of my own experience and what motivated me, I recently created an experience passport, I call it, for my son. He's 3 years old, just turned 3. And I listed out a set of experiences that I'd like to have, for him to give him between the ages of 0 and 20. And he has a stamp, and every time he finishes an experience, he gets to stamp his passport. But much of this is oriented around a diversity of experiences abroad. When he's in high school, he should spend his summers abroad with family friends, but without me.
So with each experience, he makes on stamp on that.
Exactly. And once he gets old enough to have to be able to articulate his opinion around this, he'll be able to change the experiences that I've planned for him as well. I'm conscious not to be to dictate too much for him.
Job. Okay. Jonathan, what you do is very interesting. And I think it will have a lot of impact on the way our community in Ulaanbaatar city in particular, Gare district, live. At least I think you are with a mayor who is truly trying to do so. He is trying really his best. I would like to wish you good luck.
Thank you.
And we want to see more impact on the way people live. Thank you very much.
Thank you for welcoming me.
Thank you. Thank you, Jonathan. За хүн төлөвчтэй өнөөдөр манай de-facto нэвтрүүлгийн зочноор Жонатан Хөөрш Утопиа компаний гүйцэтгэх захирал оролцлоо. Их баярлалаа.
Одоо жишээлбэл
Also, if you see tickets are going into the